Okay, once again, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will be, okay. I told you I'd be fumbling around trying to figure out how to do that. It always hides the little window of stop sharing screen. Greetings. Welcome to our family webinar series. We're so glad that you're joining tonight. We have an exciting topic tonight because it's right on the horizon when you and your students will be choosing their move-in time slot, learning a lot more about how living on campus works. We're very pleased tonight to be joined by Rebecca Caldwell, the Director of Residential Wellbeing. Give us a wave, Rebecca. We're also very happy to have Nikki Smith back with us, a webinar veteran here in the Family Webinar Series. Nikki is the Director of Housing Services. We have the fabulous, the marvelous Maeve Marley, who is one of our program coordinators here in our office at New Student Family Program. She's in charge of Weeks of Welcome. And my name is Barry Lenore. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the three program coordinators here in New Student Family Programs. I'm in charge of family engagement. So like it or not, I'm your guy. We're going to turn things right over to Rebecca because we've got a lot to cover. I do want to give the logistics of how this works in a webinar. I'm glad to see that we haven't reached 1,000 attendees because that's our max. I was sweating a little bit that we might get that. You as attendees cannot chat with us, but you can put a question into the Q&A. And then we'll get to it either live. We can answer it maybe in writing if we think we can do that privately, or we might wait until the very end till we answer all the Q&A. I would ask you to think about the question that you're asking. Is it helpful for everyone, or is it so specific that we're going to have to just answer it with you? We'll kind of be behind the scenes trying to work on that, but we do want to get your questions. We do want to get your questions answered. As attendees, you can also upvote a question. Like if there's a question that somebody types in, you're like, ooh, that's the question I wanted to ask. You can upvote it to give it a little more prevalence in our eyes, but we will try to get to every single question. I think that's it for the logistics. So Rebecca can start sharing her screen and we'll learn from you.
While Rebecca's sharing, I just note that we've got some folks who've kind of raised hands. We're not necessarily going to be able to call on you during the webinar. So if you wouldn't mind dropping whatever you're raising your hand about into the Q&A, I'm going to try to focus what I can on questions and answers while Rebecca talks, and we'll bounce back and forth. But just drop those questions in the Q&A, please.
Thank you, Nikki.
All right, Barry, can you confirm that you're seeing a full screen from me?
It's a beautiful picture, beautiful photograph. Welcome home, full screen.
Perfect. Very, very good. All right. So every year I get more technologically challenged. So we're really glad you're here tonight. Tonight we're going to probably start with 20-30 minutes just on everything about move-in. This is kind of a joint presentation that Nikki and I wrote together. I'll do the primary talking, and then as Nikki mentioned, she'll help us manage the Q&A. And so at Virginia Tech, we have a trio of departments that make up the residential experience, and that includes residential well-being that I get to work with, housing services that Nikki is the director of, and then our third partner who's not with us tonight, but we'll actually talk a little bit about his populations as well, which is our Office of Living Learning Programs. And so Dr. J.B. Penman is the third co-director of the entire residential experience. So we'll kind of be sharing all of our perspective tonight. Some things that we're going to try to cover include signing up for a move-in time slot, which is about to begin, kind of short-term and long-term parking on move-in day, where you should check in, where you can get a cart, what are the required events during move-in week, especially kind of the first 48 hours that your student is with us. We'll talk about RWB community orientations as well as some academic orientations that will happen in the first few days. Maeve is going to share with us about welcome events, and if we have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about some tips for successful living and maybe even some tips for successful transitions for you as a family. So that's our roadmap this afternoon. So move-in time slot selection does begin this week. So your student will have assigned time slot that they can pick their move-in day and time. Move-in happens August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Our first move-in slot in the morning is at 7 a.m. The last move-in slot is at 5 p.m. and your time slot lasts 1 hour. When your time slot begins, so for instance, you sign up to move in Tuesday the 20th at 9 a.m., your student's Hokey passport, which is in essence their key, because a fully kind of electronic locking system, will be activated exactly at 9 o'clock. So if you go to their door at 8:50, it will not, their Hokey P will not work. At 9 o'clock, their Hokey P will work. And we are really confident that an hour is a really good move-in time slot. We'll get you, we'll talk a little bit about parking and how that works. If we all stay on schedule and stay within our time slots, it's an incredibly smooth and effective process that we've honed over the years. When you sign up for your move-in slot, you will also electronically have a move-in parking hang tag. It's going to have the date, time, and a specific move-in lot location that will be your first hour's assigned move-in location. It's proximal to your residence hall, easy to get to the hall, get back, move a cart back and forth. And so it's important to stick with your time, and so that everyone can get a nice close parking spot during your move-in hour. After your hour is over, you actually have a second assigned parking spot that's also on that hang tag, and that's your longer term parking lot. So you can continue to park there for the entire rest of the day, as much as you need to kind of go down to Target, or you want to go downtown to have lunch together, or things like that. You can move in and out of that long-term parking lot. They're large enough to really accommodate you staying as much of the day as you would like. So when you think about getting ready for your day, if it's the 20th, 21st, or 22nd, you want to be going ahead and printing out that little kind of hang tag that your student received when they picked their time slot. We also really encourage you to take a look at our housing.vt.edu website, our website, and maybe more importantly, our social media, because there's a lot of really great videos out there that you can take a look at. You can find out how to use the new door lock system, how to do laundry here at Tech, how to use mobile ID, which is actually a web-based app that can also act like a key. Taking out your trash, what you need to bring a trash receptacle for your student, and finding out kind of how to use some of our different resources to take that trash out, how to put in a work order if anything is going wrong kind of in the room or in the bathroom or things like that. There's also a good video about fire safety, which is a really important part of living in a pretty dense residential location. When you arrive at your building, one of the things we'll be able to provide you with and you'll be able to access is kind of building maps. And so Tech is we are in the mountains. That shows up in the physical residential campus. There's a lot of different small sets of stairs and ramps and things like that. And so something we've provided to students and families that have been really helpful is literally maps about how to get a cart, into your building, pick the right location to minimize getting stopped at a staircase or getting stuck on a sidewalk inappropriately. And similarly, we also will be able to provide you maps about your specific building and how to kind of find your way into the building to an elevator bay, kind of up onto your floor if you're living outside of your first floor. So we've got some complicated older designs, and so there can sometimes be only one or two right ways to get a cart into the building to an elevator, but we will provide you that direction so that really minimizes any frustration you might be having that day. Like many campuses, Tech does provide the opportunity to use moving carts. It's actually one of the other good reasons to stay on time, because we know exactly kind of how many people are checking in each hour, and we have an appropriate amount of carts for families to have to use that hour. So when you arrive at your short-term parking lot, during your 1 hour slot, you can come right to your building. We'll get you checked in and started, give you a card if you want one, and let you go ahead and start the kind of back and forth of getting in. I mean, it's always helpful if your family has some beach buggies or you've got your own kind of cart or anything like that. We invite you to bring that along, makes everything a little easier, but we do have kind of a formula to know exactly how many carts people leave. And I think I skipped it. If you do end up being with us a little early, maybe you miscalculate how long it's going to take to get here, we do also have some holding lots for you to stay in before your hour starts. We collect and redistribute those carts every evening to rework them to how many people are moving into different halls each night. And we do have a number of halls that do not have any kind of elevator, and so the cart becomes not super helpful, particularly if you live in the president's quad. And so we also will provide hand trucks in some of those places that it's a lot easier to kind of bump your way up the stairs using a hand truck. We have a lot of different types of helpers who come out to really create a welcoming experience for you on your move-in day. And so you're going to be able to recognize all the residential well-being staff and housing services staff based on kind of branded apparel we'll be wearing. And you're also going to find we will have hundreds of people around who are there specifically to assist you. And so we'll have volunteers with us at check-in stations who can give you information, answer questions, be a home base you can keep coming back to ask questions throughout the day. But we'll also have a group, in addition to our student leaders, we'll have a group of volunteers that we call building ambassadors, and they actually specifically move through your buildings and will swing by, ask if you need any help. They'll have a Q&A. They'll have a lot of knowledge for you. They can bring a cart back to the lobby for you. They can offer some assistance if you have questions about like, how do I arrange this room, or what's going on with this lofting system, or things like that. Your building ambassadors are folks who are out and about and like to come around and talk with people. And then we have a couple other types of volunteers who are around. We'll have a tent at the kind of the major kind of check-in parking lot, so that you can ask questions kind of that come off right as you pull in. We'll actually have volunteers around who are just stationed around campus, places people typically get a little stuck in a sea of hokey stone, and can ask you a question and get you pointed towards, the fair that's going on down by Squires, or let you know, oh, you've gotten turned around, this is the way to downtown. And so we'll have those kind of folks as well. So welcoming families, welcoming new students is the Division of Student Affairs and many other people's priorities during the days of move-in. So you're going to find a lot of help. A lot of people are eager to welcome you. So we have a very specific, this is a result of a lot of work and a lot of intentional thought that we have been doing about what people need right as they come in. What are the most important things that a first time in college, first night at college person needs to know, right? And how do we get them engaged with academics right away? And so even though we have 3 move-in days, we have very specific things that happen on day 1 for everyone and day 2 for everyone. So we call it kind of a waterfall approach. And so on night 1, you are going to have, you will have moved in during the day, gotten your room set up. You will come to a mandatory RWB orientation on the first night. And that is a time, I'll talk a little bit more about what we share there. And right after those opening meetings, our student leaders, together with the Weeks of Welcome student leaders, will be getting students out to the great programs that we offer every night and kind of throughout those first couple of weeks once we get started. On the second day, your student's second day, so if you move in on Tuesday, day 2 is Wednesday, and so forth, your student's going to be attending a mandatory college academic session, a second RWB orientation night, and again, continuing to experience the Week of Welcome program. If we have any cadet families on here, I'll talk in a minute a little bit about how this looks slightly different for you all, even though you kind of get all these pieces in a slightly different manner. As you can hear, we have places for students to be kind of on the first day and the second day. And so one thing that will happen when you check in at your check-in station at your residence hall is that you will get one of these badges that we're displaying on here. And it will, so when you walk up, we will let you know, hey, here's where your session is tonight. Here's where you need to meet your college faculty and your college's administrators tomorrow morning. And here's where you're going to come back to on night 2. So we've got a lanyard that goes with that. We've got QR codes for all of the apps and so forth related to, kind of Hokies on Track and Weeks of Welcome. And so we give these to folks so they can have this kind of ready resource to remember where they're supposed to be. So a little bit more broadly about the residential well-being model. Residential well-being is kind of a first in the country. There's no one who's quite doing this like us, but it's a model that's focused around care, concern, and community. And I'll explain that over the next few minutes. But you may be familiar if you have a student at another campus, or you went to college yourself, or just from media about the concept of an RA, or a resident assistant. At Tech, we have a very similar concept, but we set it up slightly differently. And so we call those students student leaders. And every resident has at least 3 student leaders who are assigned to them. And I'll talk more about why in a minute. And so from kind of pretty close to when they move in, your student is going to get an email from their set of student leaders introducing themselves, talking about what's going to happen, asking them a few questions. And their student leaders will lead those community orientation meetings. So they will attend a meeting with a small group, the other people in their group who came in that day, who are also have those same 3 or 4 student leaders as their group. So it's really a community orientation. It's a way to get to know people who live proximal to you, and a way to get to know this kind of combination of support that you have. And if by any chance you have a student who's coming in early, let's say they're a marching Virginian or another group that would have been coming in early, they will come to all of our first night orientations, and we usually work with those groups to get that information kind of routed through through their kind of home group as well. So on night 1 of an RWB community orientation, one of our first goals is to allow students to meet other people who also moved in that day. So you can meet your student leaders, you meet other people on all. It may be that you and your roommate move in the same day. It may be that you move in Tuesday and your roommate moves in Thursday, but you're going to have this opportunity to meet and start to hang out with people who are also living in your proximal area. We'll talk all about everyone who's here to support you in the model. We'll talk about respect as a community. What are our expectations for how they'll treat each other, how they'll treat our buildings, how they'll treat the housekeepers, things like that. We'll get us people started on the idea of good communication with your roommates and your suite mates, if by any chance you live in a suite style living environment. We'll talk about the basic rules. We want people to know, like, here's the things you can get in trouble for even tonight. And so as you can imagine what they are, issues around underage drinking, around safety, things like that. We'll explain building access. We have a real specific kind of overnight building access system for safety, and to make sure people don't allow tailgaters, or we don't have folks in spaces they don't need to be in. And so we'll walk the students through that and other kind of safety features of the residence hall. And we'll also make sure they understand all of the immediate resources they might need. And so their access to kind of calling facilities emergencies 24/7. How do you use a student leader on duty? What happens if I'm locked out at 11:30 at night, or I have a concern, or I think I need some help overnight? What does that look like? And our mental health resources. Most SLs will use downloading our Timely Care mental health resource app as the exit ticket from their first night community meeting, to make sure that people get really, understand and have some of these key apps on their smartphone, so that they are immediately able to access some of our most important resources. On night 2, we get a lot more into the ideas of community. So we introduce text principles of community. We'll talk a little bit about how we want to live together in the halls, and almost create a bit of a kind of a principles of community for their own living environment, talk about what they expect from each other and what they want to offer, so they can get to some community agreements. We'll talk also about kind of what does that mean in terms of caring for other Hokies, whether you know them or not, and concepts kind of like no Hokies left behind. Like, what does that look like to, how does watching out for the safety of other people and having kind of a bystander-rich environment be part of a healthy community. And we'll introduce even more the concepts of roommate agreements. And for roommates who are there together, the SLs will stay behind and, offer like a little coaching or be willing to walk through roommate agreements with folks. And they'll continue to offer that resource throughout the first couple of weeks. But even that really pushing the idea of like, let's start to hammer this out. Like, what do you need? What do I need? How are we going to kind of make this work? I mentioned the waterfall approach also links to academics. And so, like I've kind of already mentioned, each day, for each day you move in, the following day, there is a focus on academics. And so very specifically, they will be introduced to and hear about the requirements of their college. So you might have a student who's in the College of Agriculture or the College of Engineering. They're going to spend time specifically with that leadership and have an even more in-depth academic session. So it is their whole second morning. So think about that. If your family stays in town and might want to visit the next day, know that your student is committed to academic things from 9 to 12 on their second morning. And also on Friday afternoon, no matter which day you moved in, colleges will also offer some kind of social event or opportunity that'll be kind of a little event related to the college, which is also like a really fun thing as we transition closer and closer to the first day of class, which is Monday, the 26th. Let me talk a little bit about the residential model. We talked a little bit about our residential experience group and the 3 groups that work together to support students. We do use a common landing site, which is housing.vt.edu. And so you can go there, and we're highlighting kind of the most important things that are going on right now. And you can click around. So you're not responsible for understanding which of us does what. You can kind of follow the prompts on the site and find the resources and the timelines and the services that you need. Our whole housing policy document is located there, which we'll go over the rules of the road with students, but is a good lesson. And like, you should probably read this document because you're in a contractual relationship with us, and here are the rules of how that works. That's a really good lesson for people to start to think about themselves in relation to institutions and contractual relationships. And then if you have concerns, there's always an opportunity to either find the RWB team member that's connected, or simply, if you don't know what to do, you can email the common district email and they will farm it out to the right folks. I mentioned a little bit about the idea that we have an unusual model of support here at Tech, and we're entering our 3rd year of it. It's been very successful for us. Tech made a really bold move to kind of stop and think about whether or not the way we were working on residential living really met the needs of today's college students, and kind of said, I think we can do better. And so we have a very large residential population, over 10,500 students on our campus. And so we have 5 teams that each support around a 1/5 of that population. And it's a combination of professionals and student staff. And so every district has a managing director, they're kind of the air traffic controller, but they've got these collection of coordinators who help on the most important tasks or things we want folks in residence, especially first time in residential living, to think about. And so we have a coordinator for case management. They work as part of the Dean of Students office. They will help students who are having mental health concerns or really complex needs. Even an academic need or a financial need often has a lot of other moving parts. And so case managers will step in, come and knock on doors when folks have had an upsetting incident, or we just have gotten clued in that someone probably needs a more complex amount of support. That's what our case managers do. There are 1 or 2 in each district. We have coordinators for Experience VT. They focus on belonging, getting involved, being engaged in the community, and belonging are such critical experiences to people's psychological well-being and their retention. They're going from fall semester to spring, going from year 1 to year 2. These are some of the pivotal things that happen if people need to find themselves on a campus in the way that works for them. And similarly, we also have coordinators for inclusion and belonging, and they think a little bit about kind of what's an inclusive campus look like, how can people find who they are in our residence halls while having meaningful opportunities to get to know folks who are different than them. How do we think about what belonging looks like for all different types of students? And so we have coordinators that focus on that. We have coordinators that focus on well-being. They're part of Hokie Wellness, so they're thinking about all types of holistic well-being, from healthy eating to getting involved in healthy movement to mental health self-care to resiliency to connection skills. And so those folks are part of the model. And our partners at Cook Counseling actually provide for the residents a group of counselors. We call them the RWE embedded counselors. They work on the residential campus, and they work Monday through Thursday, 2 in the afternoon to 11 in the evening, and Friday afternoons. And it's been a huge game changer for us, because often students might be okay during the day, or something happens during the day, but they've got a packed schedule. And now they're telling their student leader or a peer in the early evening, like, I'm struggling, like this hard thing happened to me, I'm having a rocky day. And our student leaders can walk those folks over to meet with the embedded counselors really right then in the late afternoon or early evening to mid-evening, and get kind of seen and get the support they need to kind of get through the night and get kind of in the right direction. And so we have around 5 of those. They work as a team, and they also provide technical and expert support to all of the professional teams. I mentioned that every student has access to at least 3 student leaders. And so they also come right along those same routes. And so instead of asking an RA to teach a student every single skill they could possibly need to be in college and adulting too, we said, let's get more focused, do a good job on the things that matter to us. And so about a third of our student leaders specialize in belonging and inclusion. A third of them specialize in experience VT, and a third of them specialize in well-being. And so depending on what kind of living environment your student lives in, they'll either have a threesome with one of each, or sometimes they have a quad if they live in a residential college, but with at least one of each in those different communities. And so that's why the 3+ student leaders, it aligns along. It gets us focused on the things we think are really important. If your student is going to be in the Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets, there are many elements of the RWB model in place. We have 23 senior cadets who serve as student leaders, and it's going to include your student's company commander and their battalion commander. And so it does align along the Corps' leadership structure. We provide a managing director and 2 full-time case managers to the Corps of Cadets. If you haven't been, or maybe you have just recently been for a short visit here in July for uniform fitting and orientation, you will notice that we have done a lot of really intentional shaping of that experience to start kind of skill development and let people know about resources. And we will continue that experience for them during New Cadet Week. They of course will learn a lot of the Corps' rules of the road, but they'll have very specific, like Hokies on Track sessions within New Cadet Week, where that's where we provide that same stuff that's happening in the RWB orientation nights to the Corps members within the Corps structure. So they do, even though they're going to have a really different experience that week, they're still going to get all of that Corps CORE content that's happening at the orientation nights for the civilian students. Also want to mention that probably about half of your students are going to be members of living learning programs. That may be that your student lives in a residential college, like the residential college at West AJ, or the Honors Residential Commons, or it may be that your student's in a smaller or mid-size or large traditional living learning program. So if your student's in Galileo or Hypatia, which are living learning programs for engineering students, they're in almost an entire building full of engineers, or your student might have picked to be in a smaller living learning program, like our ones around kind of spiritual development or identity or common interests or things like that. If your student's in a living learning program, when they go to sign in for their time their time slot for move-in, they're only going to see time slots for either Tuesday the 20th or Wednesday the 21st, because they have their own unique orientations that follow right behind the waterfall. And so they will attend the academic sessions on day 2, like all students. And then, so that's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday. And then Thursday afternoon and all of Friday morning, they have opportunities to be with the directors and senior students of their living learning program and really start to develop their identity, their activities, and learn about what it's going to be like in a living learning program. So there'll be no conflict with either their orientation, RWU orientation, or their academic programs, but they're also going to get those kind of extra kind of introductions to their living learning program. During those same times, if you have a student who hasn't signed up for a living learning program, you'll find that the RWB student leaders are doing some extra kind of programming and kind of social opportunities during that time. So people feel like they kind of know what to do during that time, and we continue to expand their opportunity to get to know fellow students. Right. We will leave this up here, but these are some apps that we're going to encourage your student on their first night. And actually, these apps are also in their Hokie orientation modules. So the Hokies on Track, or weeks of welcome and orientation, and kind of social app is really important and super helpful, especially during the first couple of weeks. We mentioned Timely Care, which is our 24/7 telemental health resource. They have an app. And Mobile ID, which is their electronic key app. We'll be encouraging them to download all of those right away. All right. Barry, do you want to stop and answer questions about move-in, or want to have Maeve start to talk about the weeks of welcome?
Well, I will just add that we've had a very robust Q&A, and Nikki is lightning. She is Nikki Lightning Smith answering questions, and there's been some really great questions and very engaging questions. So I just do want to say that I want to encourage everybody to wait until the very end. We're going to dangle the carrot and tell you to wait till the end, because at the end of this webinar, there'll be a slide with a link to evaluate the webinar. If you evaluate the webinar and give us your email address, we will send you a PDF of the slide deck. We'll send you the Q&A, all of it, and we'll send you a document with all the chat and all the links and a bunch of other links and things too. So if your questions don't get answered here or live, we can send that to you. And Nikki, does anything jump out at you of some of the things that have been repetitive, or some really good questions that have come out?
Sure. Being with the housing services logistical side, there are just a couple of things that are near and dear to my heart that I want to emphasize. Rebecca covered them well, but I can't help myself. Just to reiterate, your Hokie passport is your student's building and room key. The online photo submission will close on July 18th. So if your student would like to have their Hokie passport mailed to them ahead of time, they've got to get that photo in by that time. Please note, Hokie passport will only mail to U.S. addresses. They will not mail internationally. So if you have an international mailing address, then a couple of things may happen. One, if you're coming in with Cranwell and they sort of know when you're arriving, they may have your Hokie passport available when you arrive. If you come in during business hours, Hokie passport will be open. If you come in after hours, we'll get you a temporary access card until you can go pick up your Hokie passport. We will make sure you can get into your space, but the photo submission is critical if you've not already done that. As Rebecca noted, the appointments, your access does not turn on until your appointment starts. And to be 100% clear, this is automated by software. So when it says 9 a.m., it means literally 9 a.m. 8:58 a.m. is not going to cut it. And that's one of the most common things that we run into on move-in day. Students are so excited and they're ready and they're standing in front of their door at 8:58 and it's not working. And they're like, I can't get in. I'm like, if you give it 2 minutes, you will be okay. That happens enough. And then I've mentioned this a couple times, but we're only going to send one parking pass. If you just cannot help but bring more than one vehicle, please only drive one into the unloading lot at a time. part of the math that we do is making sure we have enough parking for folks to come in and come out smoothly. And so if we're bringing extra vehicles in, we can overcrowd the lots pretty quickly. So please only bring one vehicle into the unloading lot at a time. When you finish unloading that vehicle, you can take it to the long-term parking lot, switch out your pass, and come back with a second vehicle and unload it. You still only get the 1 hour to unload. Sometimes I would recommend being thoughtful about how much do you need to bring with you in August versus things that might be able to come along later if your student's traveling back and forth for any reason. Maybe winter clothing could wait a little bit. Maybe you want to wait and see how the room is going to set up is going to work before you buy a lot of storage materials. There is a Target and a Walmart and a whole bunch of other things in Christiansburg that will be more than happy to sell you items when you arrive. And so there are some ways to be strategic about what you do and don't bring with you when you get here.
And if I could add just a couple quick things, I want to put a plug in for the YMCA of Virginia Tech, the Y-Toss sale. Like students who are moving off campus 1 year will donate things like fans and trash cans and things like that and then you can buy them really cheap. Just do a Google search for YMCA of Virginia Tech Y-Toss sale. I also want to iterate, actually, I'll ask Rebecca and Nikki, can y'all find the correct link for the packing list and throw that in the chat? I had thrown a broken link into the Q&A, as well as I think maybe one of the QR codes for timely care might not be functioning. But I want to say something to families. I've answered it a few times in the Q&A about move in and like, when is it okay to stay and when is it okay to leave? And I'm going to be a little more, I don't know, old fashioned about it maybe. But yeah, your student on day one does have mandatory meetings beginning at 6:30. So if you have an early move-in time, say 9 a.m., yeah, you've got a couple of, you got that 1 hour time slot for parking, then move it to long-term parking. Yeah, you can stay a little while longer and help hang out, make the bed, explore a little bit. But we really want your student to start gaining that independence and making connections with hallmates and other people on campus. So in the evening, allow them that time to begin their journey, to begin really taking charge of their own experience. I would say if you want time around move-in, make sure it's before that you've got that time. If you have to spend the night for whatever reason, your student is occupied the next morning with their college meeting. So just know that after move-in, beginning around 5:30, 6:30 in the evening, they kind of need to be on their own. And it's not just because they need to be on their own. It's because they're starting their connection and their inclusion and belonging here at Virginia Tech. It's up to you and your family, but that's my recommendation. That's what I've been telling our parents at admitted student visits. Okay, we're going to get back into the slides and we'll keep monitoring the Q&A. We'll try to post some correct stuff. There's the packing lists, everybody. All right, I'll be quiet now.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. All right, so I'm going to talk really briefly about weeks of welcome at Virginia Tech. So I leave a little bit of time at the end for Rebecca to get back and give you all those really great tips on how to help your student transition to living in our residence halls. So weeks of welcome, the purpose of this program is to, one, be something fun and exciting for your student to do when they first get here. We understand that it's an overwhelming time and that it might be the first time that your student has, been without you. I recall very well feeling a little overwhelmed and a little lonely. So the purpose of Weeks of Welcome is to primarily give students something to do once they've started at Virginia Tech and they sort of started on this new part of their journey. That said, it's not all about having fun. We work to really intentionally plan our programs to connect your students with one another, but also with the many, many resources that our campus offers. So I'm sure you've heard a little bit today. If you've listened to our other webinars, you've heard a lot about all the things that Virginia Tech offers. So we try as best we can when your student arrives on campus to give them an introduction to the many things that they may want to utilize during their time at Virginia Tech. You could go ahead and do the next slide, Rebecca. All right, so Weeks of Welcome itself is a very wide range of programs. We have a lot of variety, which I'll talk a little bit more about on my later slides. But in short, in just 2 short weeks, we host over 70 programs. And that's not just through our office, that's in collaboration with all offices across campus. So again, we really work to connect your student with whether it be the cultural and community centers, the Women's Center on campus, their academic colleges, their residential halls, all those different things. We work with many different partners to put on events that, one, meet the interests of many different students, so large and small, and also, like I said, help connect students with the things that they really need to know and the things that they might not yet realize they need to know, but will be really helpful in the weeks and months and years to come. So Weeks of Welcome begins. Oh, that's okay. Weeks of Welcome begins when your student moves in, and it continues through the 30th of August. It ends in this really big, crazy event that covers the whole drill field called Gobbler Fest. But during week 1, we focus on fun and engagement. That's when a lot of our really big, large scale events are happening. So this includes things like Welcome Back Bingo, which is wildly popular. The students love, love, love bingo. We have the global dance party, a movie night out on the drill fields, a carnival that takes over our whole parking lot in front of the student center, and the Hokie High Spirit Rally. And that's where this photo of all the students in the shape of the VT is taken, which is their class picture. Yes, there are quite a few students in each class. We have about 7,000 students in this incoming class, more than that, and about 5,000 to 7,000 attend our event to take this photo. It's also at this event that your student gets their iconic What's a Hokie I Am t-shirt, so they won't want to miss out on that. And throughout all of our events, we have really fun giveaways for students, and more importantly, those opportunities to connect with other students. This is a great way for your student to get to know their roommate or other people on their halls. It's a great sort of icebreaker to be like, hey, do you want to have dinner and then go to this Hokie High Spirit Rally with me? It works really well, and we hope that you encourage your student to join us in these events and participate in these events, because they really are there for them for this time, and that connection only happens if they join in. So you can go to the next slide, Rebecca. Our second week, things start to ramp down a little bit. If I could show you the calendar, which I won't because it's not ready yet, it looks very jam-packed still week 2, but we recognize that classes start on the 26th. So we don't want to conflict with your students' course schedule. So our events for that week are scheduled in the afternoon and the evenings predominantly. We have a couple bigger events still, like our Cultural and Community Center fashion show, a showcase for all of fraternity and sorority life, an event where we hand out donuts, where actually the deans of colleges hand out donuts to the students, and also the therapy dogs are there. So we call it Donuts, Deans, and Dogs. That's a fun one. But we also have much smaller events during this second week. So open houses at some of our cultural and community centers, a gathering about sustainability at Virginia Tech, stand-up paddleboarding trips, but smaller things where if your student is more of an introvert or isn't so much interested in going to something big like casino night, or isn't really interested in fraternity and sorority life, there's other things that they can do. So there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of reason to go. If you get a call from your student who's in their residence hall, who's feeling disconnected, unhappy, lonely, I would highly suggest to encourage them to take out their phone, look on their Hokies on Track app, look at the Weeks of Welcome schedule, and pick an event and just try to go. Just spend a few minutes there, see what happens. They're quickly going to realize that everyone else attending that event is also looking for someone to talk to, for someone to meet. And one helpful thing that you can do as a family member is, like Rebecca said, download this app yourself. You too can search the new Hokie guide on the Hokies on Track app and download that schedule so that when your student calls and you feel like they maybe need that little extra push, you can tell them, oh, hey, well, there's a stand-up paddleboard trip tomorrow, or tonight you could go to casino night. Why don't you invite your roommate and try to go? So we do make that information accessible to you all. Like Barry said, we really hope that you allow your student the independence to go to these events, and even if it's a little difficult to give that distance, but that doesn't mean that you can't help them and you can't be there supporting them on the phone or maybe from a hotel room somewhat close by. And then, like I said, this week ends in Gobbler Fest, which covers the entirety of the drill field. If you've been to Virginia Tech, you know how huge the drill field is. If you haven't, just believe me when I say it, that it's absolutely massive. We have over 800 student clubs at Virginia Tech, and they all set up a tent on the drill field, as well as various other offices through Virginia Tech, town organizations, all sorts of things. And this event isn't just attended by new students, it's attended by everybody. all Virginia Tech students really, and even town members. So it's a great opportunity to, again, get to know more and more people and more resources and opportunities. And that, if your student doesn't go to anything else, I highly recommend they go to Gobbler Fest. It's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of cool freebie giveaways that are available at Gobbler Fest. So with that, I'll pass it back off to Rebecca to talk through those tips for a smooth transition.
Thank you. Right, so kind of in just to make a few comments before we kind of turn back to Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about the tips for successful residential living. It's a huge change to live in a residence hall. Most of our students, it's their first time living outside a variety of different family environments. They may be living with 200 people, they could be living with 1,100 people. And so there are some expectations we have for their behavior that we know makes for a better living environment. I mentioned earlier that we do need you to bring a trash can for your student and to really help them kind of figure out just like how they're going to keep their space clean. It is their responsibility to take their trash out to a local dumpster or to a compactor, depending on what residence hall they live in. And this is really, really important to just make the halls a positive place to live. We can't have them kind of putting trash in bathrooms or common spaces or things like that. We need them to take responsibility for that. And that's an important thing we'd love for you to just kind of talk with them a little bit about and help them think about what that might look like. Living in a residence hall, there are going to be fire alarms, right? So there'll be some planned drills. Somebody's going to burn enough popcorn to possibly set something off. And there's a little bit of that in kind of any common living environment. But something that's really, really important for a whole variety of factors is that students never interfere with anything related to fire safety. And that very specifically means never pulling a fire alarm, never spraying a fire extinguisher, never knocking out an exit sign. All of those are significant risk factors for people, starting to ignore kind of alarms, people not leaving when there is an actual emergency, folks not being able to see the things they need to see or have the resource they need to have in an emergency. It's something that's really, really serious for us. And so it is common that if we do have dye paste attached to kind of our poles and our most of our fire extinguishers around kind of the residential campus, and it's something we take really serious. It is typical to have a 1 to 2 semester suspension from the university for doing either of those activities. So it's really important to help people understand that is not a prank. That is a very serious violation for us at the university. And it's a silly thing to have to take a semester or 2 off from college because you did that. Kind of similarly, our living environments they rely on every resident to take care of. And so when students commit vandalism, if they punch out a ceiling tile, if they do something that makes the hall less than pleasant, especially kind of on the weekend while we kind of wait for traditional housekeeping to be back online, that makes a really difficult environment for everybody. And so it's very important that, people understand that damage is not free. It adds to costs. It creates dissatisfaction in the environment. It creates stress on the folks who work in the halls. It's really important that people respect spaces and are respectful, and particularly do not commit any vandalism in the residence halls. And we'll send some talk about that to your student right before they arrive, and we'll actually send you an email if you're on the Hokie Family Hub as well. But I'd like to kind of bring it up now. Successful living is also about kind of being, courteous and having good communication with roommates and hallmates and suite mates, treating housekeepers courteously, living in an environment where you get lots of people contribute to making this livable, and lots of people are here to have the best living experience they can. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about roommate communication and roommate agreements and so forth. Our team is out there, our student leaders and our pro staff are out to help deal with conflict in the halls. We spend a lot of time doing it, but really I think thinking ahead about what does good communication look like, what is appropriate courtesy to others will go a huge way for successful living. We talked a little bit about fire safety. There's other kind of safety concerns too, right? Being safe in the halls, not letting people tailgate in, watching out for strangers. If you see a fellow Hokie somewhere on the residential campus or downtown, and you're concerned about that, all handling that stuff is all part of creating a kind of a rich and respectful and safe campus. There's really no one who can keep our students safe more than their peers. And so we'll talk about that, and you might think about conversations with students as well about kind of like, what are you going to do to watch out for your friends? Hey, this is why you want to make sure to never let a stranger come in a door behind you. All of those things are an important part of learning to keep others safe. And also encourage, a really important part of residential living is to have experiences where you both get to know folks who are like you, who have common interests, common experiences, common backgrounds, and simultaneously have experiences where you learn about other people from different backgrounds, people with different belief systems. And so we are very intentional about kind of programming and creating experiences where both of those things happen, but they're good conversations to have with your student as well. I often will do a separate webinar with Barry for the group about this in the fall, but thinking about building your students' resiliency, this is an enormous change for your student and for you. And so as you are starting to communicate with them more from a distance, think about how you can support them to solve their own problems. I think sometimes it's a big shift as parents to go from thinking, kind of really being in charge of making sure that things get solved, to helping that transition to helping the students solve their own problems. So when they're talking about a problem, how can you ask them questions? Think about options, brainstorm opportunities, say like, hey, a great thing to do about this is to go to your faculty member's office hours, or here's the work order system number, and put that back on them so they have that experience of successfully solving their own problems as they kind of continue to kind of grow in this new independence that they're experiencing. And talking with them about what they're experiencing is incredible. People's identity and their growth is built through processing the new people and the new experiences that are happening. So ask them, like, who are you meeting? Who you're hanging out with? What did you do this weekend? And just talk with them about what are they seeing? What are they learning? What's something that they talked about in class they've never talked about before? How can you help them kind of think about what that looks and feels like? I really encourage them to connect. There's lots of ways to meet other people here. We've gone through so many of them, but just really kind of encouraging them to have the courage to build new relationships, to meet folks, to not I'll talk about this kind of on the next slide, but not fall into some of the myths we tell each other about how at college we tout and talk a lot about meaningful friendships that develop in college. Many people have lifelong friends, you might too, that you met when you were in this age group, and you look back and you think how meaningful that was. But I think sometimes we accidentally also send a message that will happen immediately. Like, by Labor Day weekend, you'll have met the best friends in your entire life. And for some kids, they meet kids early in that click, but for most students, it's a process of finding your community, building it out, figuring out who a friend is. What do you want in a friend? And so if they're saying, especially with kind of social media presence, people can fall into the idea that everyone else has found their friends except for me. In actuality, most people are going through a process. And so reminding them of that, letting them know you just got to keep trying to find your people. You're going to find them here. There's 40,000 people here, right? But it may not happen immediately. And that's okay. That's actually the much more normal experience. I think the other thing to think about is that failure is just part of the road to success. It's just feedback. And so don't be afraid to share maybe some of your own experiences of failures at that age. Just normalize setbacks as something that everybody experiences kind of on their way to success. And so if that first test is a disaster, if it's harder than they expected to live in a residence hall, they're more homesick than they expected, all those things are typical. And if you say, like, you know what, I also was really homesick, or, I know that so-and-so from our hometown kind of also had this experience and they really ended up having a great experience, let people know it doesn't have to go perfectly. Perfectionism is a really difficult thing. It's really common in young people, and really a belief in effortless perfection. And so, just remind your student that the stuff they see on social media is other people's curated experience. And they themselves are probably putting out a curated experience through whatever kind of communication channels they might use. And that, people don't, don't post about the things that are hard, about transition all that often, but everyone is having challenges. And so you don't have to do it perfectly. It's going to be kind of messily exactly what they need it to be, if they just kind of keep on trying. And so keep kind of reinforcing for your student, like, you are going to get what you want out of this experience. And it might come with a few failures. It might come with some things taking a little longer than you expect, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen for you. And if they are struggling, you've learned about a lot of resources tonight that can help them out. And you can reach out to our teams to kind of remind you about some of those resources as well. And just lastly, this is your transition too. It's a biggie. It's a huge one, big feelings, right? And so there's some value in kind of really thinking about being compassionate for yourself, and even possibly being willing to share that with your student. You probably not experienced this before, even if you've got some at college. This kid hasn't left for college, right? And so, it's a lot of transition. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be all of those things. Both you and your student are experiencing really normal transitions, a really, really big change in your life. And so, be compassionate with yourself, be compassionate with what they're doing, as well. Don't forget to focus on what's positive, right? Savor time, experiences, the small, new, special ways that you're going to find to connect with your kid now that it might be probably for a lot of folks, the first time you've ever lived apart. What is that going to look like? What little rituals will happen? What's going to matter? And savor those really, really good moments, and think about what you're grateful for each day, and share it with your student. Ask them what they're grateful for, today. With, compassion and mindfulness and gratitude are all things that help people go through transitions and help people grow in their resiliency. So as you also have a big transition coming up, I encourage you to be kind with yourself and think about some of these tools for your own experience as well. Thanks, Barry.
Rebecca, there was one question I could not answer.
You got it.
And so we had someone ask if residential well-being student leaders are CPR trained.
Ooh, that's a great question. Most of them are not CPR trained. What they are trained, they're trained on a couple of different things. They're trained on, every residence hall has an AED, which is actually it's pretty incredible how much they are pretty self-explanatory right now. They also all have one or more one boxes, which are Narcan kits. Our 911 system and our on-campus VT rescue, have kind of a VT rescue has only a several minutes response time, and our 911 operators will walk students through exactly what they need to do in that lag time between when that call starts and VT rescue and VTPD get onto the scene. So while some may have it as a background, their training includes Narcan, following directions on AEDs, and also we do stop the bleed, which is that's an additional training that they all do to actually deal with life-saving big bleeds. So.
And VT Rescue is actually in charge of the AED program. So
that's right.
I don't know that we have one installed in every single residence hall. Are we?
We added about 7 more, so I think we are up to them.
Okay.
This spring.
It's ultimately a process because they're run through VT Rescue and not through housing or through residential well-being. And so it is a process of funding and getting them installed. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, Rebecca, if you'll stop sharing your screen, and I will share my final slide, as we have reached the 1 hour point. Thank you so much for such an informative and fantastic program. I think you and I, Rebecca, you would be good cop, I'd be bad cop when talking about move-in and allowing time and stuff. I'm the guy who rolls up to the curb with the minivan, throws the door open, throws the laundry basket full of stuff out and says, okay, have a great one. We're ready for the cruise. Just kidding. We really appreciate your kindness and your approach to caring for our students. And for this whole process, it's super well thought, and we're just very, very appreciative of it. We will continue to keep the webinar live, but I do want to highlight, hopefully right now you see the end slide that says thank you for watching. I do want to highlight that we do have an evaluation. If you would please complete the evaluation. And then the last question of the evaluation is, if you want the slides and the Q&A and the chat and all the links and even some Easter eggs from Barry thrown into a document and sent to you, fill out this survey and get it to us, and then give us a few days to be able to send this to it. We're going to put this webinar on our YouTube channel. It takes a while to process, and we also clean up the transcript and remove all of my uhs and ums, which number in the 300s by the time we get the transcript on. But you can see our past webinars here on our YouTube channel. We have one more coming up live on July 17th. Your next steps as a family are to make sure that you know what's happening and when it's coming at nowwhat.vt.edu. There is that optional family view of the orientation, the mandatory virtual orientation that your student has to take. You get to do an optional one at orientation.vt.edu as a family. And then your student is receiving all the information. You're not getting it at your Hotmail or your AOL email address. Your student is getting it at their @vt.edu email, and your student should be checking their email daily. I think it's around July 15 when the time slots begin. Is that correct, Rebecca? Around July 15?
So we actually sent out to everyone this morning the notice of when you get to pick your move-in time, and then the first students will start picking their move-in appointments actually this Thursday, the 11th. The first group opens up at 8:30 a.m. And so that'll get started there. So just one quick note, we will not create the parking passes until after the move-in appointment selection process closes and we get a little bit closer. When we create those passes, if I give them to you on the 23rd and you change your appointment on the 24th, I'm then recreating a pass. And so we wait until that process is pretty firmly set before we send those out. But students will get them to their Virginia Tech email, and they'll also be able to download them on the STARS portal once they are good to go.
Cool, thank you. We've posted in the chat also a link to our new student and family programs link tree. It's basically a web page with every link of every app and everything that we have. Families, if you're not yet on the Hokie Family Hub, you need to be, along with 69,000 other people, in the Hokie Family Hub. I've posted that link into the chat. I will post the link to the survey into the chat if you can't see your screen right now. Maeve, Rebecca, Nikki, is there anything else that we should mention while we have people's ears? How about thank you for
I'm going to
watching?
go ahead and answer one of the
great.
questions live. How are the move-in appointments given out? Who has priority? It's much like with room selection. These go in contract signature order. So the earlier students sign their contract, the earlier they'll be able to pick a move-in time. What if you come for your time slot, but the person before has not left yet? So that's why we're so careful about the math. We try to make sure that we schedule it such that if there's a little bit of issues, we still have some flexibility. But I do really ask that as much as possible, please stick to your appointment times. If we have people just making their own times, we are going to have parking and traffic difficulties that I have worked incredibly hard to try to avoid. Please help me here. And so there's a reason the appointments are important. Someone has just typed e-bikes. Please don't bring them. So we've covered that a little bit, and there is one of the FAQs that asked about it, but it is policy 5005. And so as a fire safety precaution, e-scooters and EPAMDs, including hoverboards and the chargers for these devices, are not permitted to be stored inside any university-owned or leased buildings. Any chance of out-of-state priority for movement, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that. So like I said, this is based on contract signature order. So the earlier a student sign their contract, the earlier they're going to be able to pick their move-in time.
And the question about the AED, did you already answer that one? I'm sorry.
I believe Rebecca did, yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, we're past the hour, and I try to keep these as close to an hour as possible. Folks, if you have questions that did not get answered, you see our email address is on that screen. It is down at the bottom right corner, families@vt.edu. And you know what? If you have a question about something about residential well-being or about move-in, the way that we'll figure out the answer is we'll Google search move-in dates, Virginia Tech 2024. And that's how so that's the way we recommend you finding something. We've got a lot of information that's out there. And yes, we do appreciate you using the Q&A right now to say thank you and show your appreciation, because I'm the kind of person who needs that external appreciation in order to validate what I do. We're so thankful for all of you being here tonight. Again, if you want the chat, the Q&A, and even the slides, do the evaluation. I'm going to throw it one more time into the chat. It's right there on your screen. And I think we're ready to wrap up. On behalf of New Student and Family Programs, Residential Wellbeing and Housing Services, Rebecca Caldwell, Director of Residential Wellbeing, Nikki Smith, Director of Housing Services, Maeve Marley, Barry Lenore, New Student and Family Programs, and our NOTA intern in the background, Samantha McDonald. We're glad you're watching also. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and go Hokies. You knew I would say that, right?